Chapter 6. Roland returned to his room. It was still raining outside and the thunderstorm wasn't letting up. The time spent in the ascension space felt like seconds to the people outside, so not much time had passed. Martha had accompanied Roland to his room after the reveal that his elemental affinities were low. She brought over some tea and decided to let the boy cool off for now. "If you need anything, just call me, young master. The Baron will be returning to the mansion tomorrow." Roland just nodded while being quiet. After he heard the door closing behind his maid, he flopped on his bed like a dead fish. "What is this shit? What am I supposed to do now?" He hit the bed with his 10-year-old fists while gritting his teeth. After a bout of rage, he jumped right up and ran up to his desk. "Where is that book?" He started flinging the books left and right and managed to find the one that explained the elemental affinities in more detail. 0% on all of the affinities, this means. He already knew the answer. He had gone through these books multiple times. Still, he needed to check one more time. He started reading, his eyes going through the information while his brain digested it with astonishing speed. Ugh! He threw the book he was reading to the side and sat down at his desk, his head moving backward as he looked at the ceiling. To change your class to any of the element mages, you need to unlock an elemental affinity skill. You can't unlock it if your connection to the elements is non-existent. If you wanted to progress further in your life as a mage, this was a requirement. He could not go any further. Getting that skill required his affinity to at least be at 1%. This was a rare case, a 1 in a million occurrence. People like him were considered inept at becoming a mage and mostly strayed away from that path. He was a special case though. All of his stats made everyone think that he would be a talented mage. He had learned the mana sense skill at a young age and his intelligence was off the charts. In the book it said that most mages had an intelligence stat at 20 when they started out. He, on the other hand, had more than double of that. There was no reason to believe that he could be anything other than a mage. Something is playing a stupid joke on me. I can't even swap this class till I get to level 25. He decided to glance at his status screen. He had even leveled up to the 3rd level of mage due to the build-up of his experience. After the 9th birthday, his father arranged a goblin fight. Just as the first time, he would fight a one-on-one battle each week, earning experience along the way that could be then used when he ascended. The experience build-up wouldn't work for further classes though. This was a one-time thing before the ascension. He thought about his status. He wanted to see all the new skills that he had gained as well as their explanations. Mana Bolt, spell, a focused bolt of mana energy that deals mana damage to one target. The damage done depends on the user's intelligence. Basic Mana Shaping, skill, lets the mage shape mana into spells, gives bonuses to intelligence and willpower. The higher the skill, the better the user is at forming spells. Basic Mana Regulation, skill, helps regulate the mana in the user's body. Increases mana regeneration by helping absorb ambient mana from the environment. Mage Class, increases mana by 20% and increases mana regeneration by 15%. Blessed by Mana, trait, unlocked if a person has more than 40 intelligence after reaching the mage class at the first ascension ritual, gives bonuses to MP after each level up. Basic Incantation, skill, increases spell chanting speed and proficiency. He then looked at his stats after he was done with reading those. His MP shot up quite high compared to the rest. Name, Roland Arden, Mage level 3. HP 185/185. MP 719/719. SP 237/237. Strength, 14. Agility, 15. Dexterity, 24. Vitality, 14. Endurance, 15. Intelligence, 47. Willpower, 26. Charisma, 10. Luck, 6. He looked at his stats. People at level 1 who specialized in a field mostly had their stats at about 20. For instance, a warrior would mostly have a strength, vitality, and endurance rating close to 20. He was a level 3 mage and his intelligence was getting close to 50, but all his physical attributes were slightly below a basic level 1 warrior. All my stats scream mage, I even got a trait that gives me more useless mana. Even if I respec later I will be behind everyone. My physical stats are below average when it comes to warriors, my dexterity is high though, should I switch to an archer? He started scratching his head and brought out the book that had some class and skill combinations. This was something that a noble title got you, most of the people outside didn't have the luxury of planing and most of the class combinations were off limits to the commoners. He had focused on the mage-related classes without much thought about the other ones for one reason or the other. He put all of his eggs in one basket and now they exploded at once. He needed to come out with a new battle plan. I must think of something plausible. If I leave it to that daddy of mine, I'll be working in the army for the rest of my life. All of his brothers were on a one-way ticket to the army. His father was quite the militaristic nut and didn't consider people that didn't work in that field as much. At least that was how Roland saw it, he couldn't be sure as the interactions with his father were limited. He also tried to avoid him most of the time along with the other brats from his family. He was banking on evading the military by becoming a mage. Mages were rarer than the other combat classes and were sought after. He would be able to choose his path if he became one. Apparently, that wouldn't be an option now, he would have to level up in this class which was a dead end. I still have the mage class unlocked, but if I wanted to be a magic swordsman I'd need a tier 2 mage class to unlock this tier 3 class. He went through his book once more. Most of the better classes that synergized with the mage class required a tier 2 version. You even needed some tier 2 classes to unlock other tiers 2 classes that would let you get a better tier 3 class. The elementalist class was one of those, that required all of the element tier 2 mage classes to unlock. Damn elemental affinity. I need this skill to even unlock a general upgrade to the tier 1 class. I would be okay with this shitty tier 2 superior mage class that doesn't really give many bonuses to anything but it also requires those affinities, they are just lower. He wanted to strangle the person that decided that you needed to have one skill to unlock any one of those classes. The possibility of having this was super low, 1 in a million or less. Does it have something to do with me being from another world or something? Wait, do I really need to have a combat class? Wouldn't it be better not to risk my life and just make money in peace? He rubbed his chin, he had ignored most of the construction classes that were presented there. Mostly due to the only viable one at tier 1 was the blacksmith. He imagined himself stuck in a stuffy room hammering away on some ingots. Well, might not be that bad. Is there anything that works well with a tier 1 mage class till tier 3 at least? He went through the book. It had some combinations that could work with the blacksmith class. Blacksmith is the first and gives basic bonuses to crafting weapons and armor but nothing special. You can unlock a weaponsmith or an armorer at tier 2. After that, the most common classes are tier 3 master smith and tier 4, grand master smith. He started going for the requirements for those classes. The blacksmith class used dexterity as one of its main stats along with strength and endurance. Those two later stats weren't so high, but he had high dex so this was feasible. Plus he would gain more strength by leveling up his mage class so when he started anew as a blacksmith he shouldn't have any problems. I need to find something that combines with those first. He looked for the page that described good combinations with these manufacturing classes. He knew that enchanted weapons were a thing, so there should be a class that was primed for that. Here we go. Tier 2 RuneSmith, it focuses on enchanting weapons and armor with words of power that are called runes. He looked at this class, the description sounded interesting. It allowed the placement of basic enchantments on weapons and other items. There was another class that was similar to this called Enchantsmith. The two differed slightly due to the process of creating their items. Enchantments and runes used a different language. If you compared the two to modern-day languages from Earth then the enchantment language would be akin to regular English. The runic language, on the other hand, consisted of symbols and was more similar to Asian languages like Japanese or Chinese. From the two, the runic one was considered better but harder to master. Both of those Tier 2 smith classes required him to learn the scribe profession. The mana scribe was a special Tier 1 class and its requirement was the calligraphy skill along with the mage class. It allowed people to create one-use magic scrolls. The class sounded special but in reality, it was quite trashy. You didn't get many skills and the only thing it was good for was for creating these scrolls. Leveling it up didn't give you many stat points and it was mostly considered a side job. Still, the scrolls that a person produced could be sold to adventurers. The higher tier of scrolls you could write, the more you got paid. RuneSmith or EnchantSmith, the first was better but harder to obtain as you had to gain a skill related to runes. It was something you only unlocked by actually learning. There wasn't really a shortcut as you had to study hard and then you unlocked the skill. Well. I have always been a grinder. Roland wanted to take it easy, but the thought of living in some shady barracks with some smelly dudes was making him debate on this option. The path towards it was quite convoluted and he would have to work hard for it. In the end, though, this was a money-making class. Even at Tier 2, he would already be able to earn massive amounts of gold and be free from this noble life. It was worth the risk. I'd like to go with this. These runes sound interesting and it says that the more intelligence and dexterity the crafter has, the better the runes become. Also, the mana comes in handy when making or using them, and mana is the only thing I'm good for. The only problem was convincing his father. This choice wasn't a battle class. He also didn't see any options that hinted about unlocking any combat-related classes after getting to RuneSmith. It was still better than working as a soldier though. He'd rather make swords all day than stay on guard duty at some fortress. Okay, it's decided, I'm going with RuneSmith. I can make this work, having money is the answer. He looked at the book and nodded. He had to prepare before meeting his dad. He needed to explain that this was a better idea and maybe even a blessing in disguise. He already had 3 sons that were good at fighting, he didn't need the 4th one to do the exact same thing as them. Yes, I bet he will let me do it, I hope. I need to find a location that I can learn blacksmithing and scribing, along with some magic. He concentrated. He had gone through all the books in the library and knew how the kingdom looked like. The main plan was to go to a magic academy that was located in one of the largest cities, but that went out of the window now. He needed a less costly option that would guarantee him safe progress. There is one. Lustal City fits the bill. It also has an academy where they train weaponsmiths and even have some facilities for mages and a nice library. The battle plan was set. He went through it for the rest of the day as he waited for his father to come home. He already had an appointment. His father was quite punctual, so he knew that he would be there. The next day Martha brought him food and a change of clothes. She made him look better than usual. She couldn't let Roland look bad when visiting his father all on his own. Everything is going to be fine, Master Roland, it's just a little setback. She smiled at him, her face showing some wrinkles as she was getting along with her age. Being a maid didn't really net her any valuable skills besides housekeeping. People needed battle classes to increase vitality that would then let them live longer and look younger. His father was one of those. He was someone that looked to be in his early 40s, but in reality, he was getting close to his mid-60s. The Baron will see you now, proclaimed the House Arden butler while opening the large white door that led inside Lord Arden's office. Roland moved forward. Even though he was an adult inside, he still felt uncomfortable. It was as if he was getting called into his boss's office for one of those talks. There he was in all his glory, looking at some papers that looked really small in those mitts of his. His digits looked like thick sausages and he looked strange in that blue shirt fit for nobles. "Greetings, father, it is me, Roland," he announced himself while moving his hand to his heart, which was the national salute that the people did in this country. The man just murmured while looking at his papers. Roland gulped hard and used this chance to pronounce his plan. "Father, I know that I have no aptitude to be a mage. So I think I should become a runesmith, it's a class that my high intelligence works well with. He was nervous and talked as fast as he could without breathing in much between the sentences. He presented his plan and the city that had the best facilities to accommodate his progress at a safe rate. As he was finishing up, his father raised his hand. Lustal? You want to attend the Lustal Academy of Arts? Roland stopped talking instantly. His large bull of a father was looking at him with quite the intense stare now. Why yes? Think it has good facilities and doesn't cost that much. The man rubbed his chin and replied without thinking for too long. No, that's out of the question. You need to raise your level first. RuneSmith. A peculiar choice. He placed the papers that he was holding down on the desk and continued looking at Roland, straight into his eyes. I'll allow this, but you must earn your keep. Even as a low-level mage you can find some work. Adam will make the preparations. He picked up the papers and started going through them once more. He still gave Roland one bit of advice before sending him away. The Arden House is a house of knights. I hope you know what that means? We don't want it being associated with crafting professions, do you understand? So you're telling me that it is shameful to work as a blacksmith and you don't want me to mention my name in public? Hey! Understood. Roland wanted to say more about this, but he didn't think that the man would listen to the 10-year-old him. So he just nodded and stepped out. Adam heard everything from both of them and would be making the arrangement. His plan of becoming a runesmith had gone through, but he would apparently have to work for it and maybe even put himself in harm's way. Chapter 7. A 10-year-old with a sword in his right hand was standing in a dark, damp dungeon. In front of him, 2 green humanoid-looking monsters were glaring. These goblins gave out a loud high-pitched sound and charged forward. The boy stood still, his sword arm lowered while the left one was raised up. He was mumbling something incoherent to himself. The more he did, the louder he got. Source of all magic, heed my call. He had his index finger pointing at the charging monster, the other 4 clenched together tightly. Suddenly a bluish glow appeared in front of those fingers. It started out small as a grain of rice, but soon the tiny speck expanded to the size of an egg. The furthermost goblin was now just a couple of steps away from the youth. Its teeth were rattling as it was ready to feast on its prey. Gather before me and strike down my enemies, Mana Bolt! The boy shouted, and the egg-sized energy ball shot forward. It collided with the monster's head, inserting itself right into the eye socket before exploding. The boy gazed at the humanoid being, part of its head exploding as it collapsed on the ground and slid forward due to the momentum of its charge. The other monster didn't show much of a reaction after seeing its friend's head partially exploding. It just charged on and tried clawing at the youth. Roland was counting on this, and he just stepped to the side, the overswing and forward momentum of the monster's attack giving him an opportunity for a counter. There was no hesitation in his movement like a year before. His trusted short sword was plunged right into his enemy's throat. The goblin moved his hands to its neck as a reflex, the blade that was stuck in it getting pulled out instantly. A fountain of monster blood erupted. The creature fell down, dead and unmoving. Well, think I've killed all of them. I guess that's it for the easy XP. But do I really need to chant cringy stuff like that every time? Maybe not being suited for a mage was a blessing in disguise. Roland was standing in the training dungeon, his old trainer nowhere to be seen. He had finished the last of the goblins. These creatures were captured for training purposes, and it would be a shame to waste the experience. Wonder where that old bastard will send me to, probably to some cheap backwater village where he can forget about his useless son. Roland poked the first goblin that he killed with his mana bolt. The power of this spell was so-so. It was fine against weak spots like the eyes, but took some time to aim and you couldn't fire them off in quick succession. He also needed to chant his spell, which lowered the speed and utility of this skill. I guess that's why mages are considered a backline class. Will I need to find myself a party of some sort? Will Daddy Dearest give me a servant for protection? He poked the other goblin with his sword as well, his eyes focusing more as he tried to feel for a mana signature. This one has a monster core. Monster cores, or also called mana stones, looked like gems or crystals. They formed in some creatures and were used as ingredients for various things. There was a low chance of finding them in a goblin. The stone inside this monster was the size of a grain of rice. Best keep this for myself. He didn't trust the people in this estate. He tried returning the monster core to one of the servants, but instead of getting a reward, it was just snatched. They just gave him the excuse that this was the property of the Baron and would be used for the estate. He, on the other hand, was sure that the servants were probably pocketing things that could be sold for themselves. Thus they developed a habit of withholding items and information. These things are small enough for me to keep them in my pocket. He looked at the cold and dark dungeon and then quickly left. He was seen by some servants that were back to treating him coldly after the big reveal. He continued walking further, finding a certain thick hedge wall. He squeezed through a certain spot and arrived at a small area with a large tree. He was surrounded by shrubs and greenery. On the other side was the flower garden where mostly the noble ladies had their tea parties. He leaned up against the tree and took out a small box filled with some sandwiches. This type of food wasn't popular here, as nobles mostly ate food prepared by the chefs. He had managed to convince Martha to make him some so that he could eat it on the way. Tomorrow is the day, finally leaving this shithole, got that going for me at least. He bit into the bread that had some cheese and meat in it and started eating it. While he was thinking about his future, he heard something rustling in the bushes. Even without looking in the direction, he knew who that was. Big Brothwer Roand. He heard a child's voice. It was high-pitched and the pronunciation wasn't quite there. This was his new younger sister. His dad couldn't keep it in his pants and the mistress gave birth to this child. It's not Roand but Roland, Lucien. For some reason, this kid liked to run around the compound looking for him. She had somehow found his hiding place. Luckily the child knew how to keep a secret. She was even super happy when he told her that it would be a secret between the two. Lady Francine doesn't like it when you talk to me, she'll give you and me an earful if she finds out. The small girl with golden locks didn't seem to care, as she just ran up and gave her big brother a hug. Roland felt a bit uncomfortable from the show of affection and reluctantly petted her head. If sho wait mwami 1th find out. The small girl proclaimed while looking at the sandwich that was in Roland's mouth. The brother reluctantly gave up his breakfast to the child. Ah, have it your way, you little squirt. Brothwer my birthday ith shun don th forgith though come. Roland looked at the girl and gave her chubby cheeks a little pinch. Your birthday, yes, it should be in a couple of weeks. It would be her third birthday this time. While he was in the family's good graces, he was allowed to take part in it, even though he mostly just sat in the corner not doing much. I will see what I can do, now run along before your mother catches you here. He ruffled up his sister's head before escaping her big green eyes. He didn't want to lie to a child of this age, but it was better than making her cause a scene. He would be leaving tomorrow and he couldn't do much about it. She'll forget me after a few months, not sure if I'll ever return to this mansion after I leave anyway. He left towards his room. He was mostly packed, all thanks to his trusted maid Martha. The same woman was now hugging while weeping. Calm down, Martha, I will be fine. No, young master, I will go to the Lord and ask for permission to come with you. How can he send you away unattended? The woman was quite attached to him, but he wouldn't be allowed to take any servants with him. Adam said that I will be looked after there, don't need to worry about anything, this was bound to happen. The woman dried her tears with a handkerchief while looking at the smaller boy. Young master, be sure to write a letter if there is something bothering you. You're such a brave young lad, you never did cry or complain about anything, such an obedient child. She continued hugging him while sobbing. In the end, he had to push her out of his room. He needed to check if he took everything that he could. He decided to take some blank papers and some calligraphy books. He needed to heighten this skill to the maximum sooner or later. The night went by fast and he was ready to leave. The only person to send him of was of course his personal maid that looked like she didn't sleep too well. She sure loved this Roland boy, didn't she? The new Roland didn't feel like this woman's affection was focused on him. She was probably just a gentle soul that cared for the child that once was inhabiting this body. From his perspective, if she ever found out that it was occupied by some weird nerd from Earth, she would probably do a quick 180. Still, he felt a bit sad to leave her here with these posh assholes. Maybe in the future if I have enough money I can hire her myself. He stepped into the coach, his bags were ready. He waved at the friendly lady and was finally able to leave. The next destination was the train station. Yes, this world had trains, there were also flying airships, but they were above the Baron's pay grade. Roland had once visited one of these magic stations. The contraptions looked like old-fashioned steam trains, but instead of steam, they run on mana stones. There was no one to send him of, the coachman and his helper just carried his bags to the train and that was it. He waited there for the mana engine train to arrive. Compared to the earthly counterparts, there were a lot more wagons getting pulled behind it. Besides transporting people, it was used for moving various goods. Well then, I'll be off. He muttered to himself. He had slowly gotten used to the solitude that this world provided him with. He sat down at his designated seat and looked at other families sending their loved ones off with hugs. He could see some of them smile and others were even crying while waving at the train that was leaving. Family hey! He turned away, not sure what to make of this, his eyes closing as he tried taking a nap. The ride was going to be a long one. Back at the Arden estate, Adam was getting called in by the Baron for a little chat. Did he leave? Yes, my lord. He didn't reject the offer? Did you make it clear? Yes, my lord. He knows the destination. The muscly man tapped the desk he was sitting on while looking out the window. He is surprisingly headstrong, his performance against the lesser monsters was satisfactory. The butler nodded. If you compared the boy to the other young masters, he lacked the stats of a warrior, but he was very resolute and clear-headed. Even during the first fight, he didn't suffer much of a setback. His brothers on the other hand mostly failed and had to be rescued by their helpers. With some training, he could pass for a knight. He wishes to be a lowly smith though. The man frowned, he couldn't let the other nobles know what he had a son working as a blacksmith. Don't worry sir, everything was prepared. The boy will probably ask for assistance in due time. The Baron nodded and waved his servant away. He was smoking quite a large cigar. He blew out some smoke through his nostrils before speaking out to himself. If he doesn't, then so be it, it will be his choice, he is old enough to make his own mistakes. He placed the cigar to the side and then focused back on the military papers in his hand. He was still lagging behind schedule. Roland had no idea what his parent was plotting back home, but soon he would discover it. The train ride would take a couple of days. The speed of this machine wasn't great and it was pulling a lot of weight. The seats were uncomfortable and the constant sounds of heavy machinery were keeping the young man awake. He shook his head and looked outside at the constantly changing scenery. He also took a glance at some of the skills he had learned during the almost 5-year period he was at the noble house. Basic one-handed swordsmanship level 9 gives a bonus to one-handed swordsmanship combat along with the basic knowledge. Basic hand-to-hand combat level 9 gives a bonus to hand-to-hand combat along with the basic knowledge. Basic running level 9 a skill that lets a person run slightly faster and use less stamina while running. Basic sprint level 9 a skill that lets a person sprint faster and use less stamina while sprinting. Basic climbing level 9 a skill that helps you climb surfaces. Basic sneaking level 9 a skill that allows the user to blend with the environment and avoid detection. Lowers the noise produced by the user's footsteps. Basic leather armor proficiency level 4 a person with this skill can move better in leather armor. He had gained many skills that began with basic, they filled out his skill menu and he even had to scroll down to read them all. I never could push them past level 9, probably because of class restrictions. Had to sneak out during the nights to get that sneaking skill up. Ugh, when will we finally arrive? What was that place's name again? Ah yeah, the city of Kerwin. He only had the location of this city on the map. It was just in the middle of the kingdom without anything special about it. The only thing that was going for it, was that it had a dungeon right next to it. The ride continued without anything happening along the way. Roland was half expecting someone to try to rob the train, but there were a lot of strong-looking people guarding it. Now arriving at Gerwin, please take all of your belongings while going out. The technology in this world was strange. Some parts were ahead of his old world while others were lagging behind. Like the flying ships, planes from his old world didn't compare to those flying fortresses. Supposedly if you are a high-level master smith you can work on those. Maybe I'll be making flying yachts in the future. He smiled to himself while departing from the train. There were many people in various looking clothes. Some were more Victorian-era looking while others looked like medieval knights in full plate armor. Are you Sir Roland? It didn't take long for someone to notice him. It was a man in his 30s with quite the large handlebar mustache. Yes, that's me. You must be the hired help. Yes, please follow me, I have been instructed to take you to your lodgings. The man helped Roland carry the luggage and had a carriage prepared for him to ride on. He was slowly getting nervous, wondering what his new living place would be. He was counting on it mostly being some kind of barrack area with other people, maybe a room at an inn came with bed and breakfast. The two left the train station and they started moving. Roland could see the city through the carriage window. He saw some wooden buildings here and there, even an inn and the fabled Adventurers Guild building. Guess you can really become an adventurer. But a better term for it would be a monster hunter or hired help, as you just do odd jobs. The coach started moving out of the city after the coachman told the guards something and headed forward. The more they traveled the narrower the roads got. After 30 minutes of heading God knows where, Roland started to get worried. He didn't bring me out here to rob me, did he? He knew that I was coming, so I didn't really ask for any identification. What if he wasn't hired by the Baron? What if he killed the real servant and I'm next in line? His mind raced and he moved his hand to the side. He had taken a dagger for a situation like this and was now clutching it while sweating. He had left his leather armor and short sword in his baggage, so this was his side weapon. Soon enough the journey ended and he heard the coachman getting off, his steps getting closer and closer. The door swung open, Roland ready to pull out his weapon, but he halted as he saw a bored-looking man with luggage in hand. Sir Roland, this is the place I was supposed to take you. I also have a letter from your father, Baron Wentworth. I'm a bit too jumpy today, I must be tired after the long bumpy ride. Roland gave out a sigh of relief and finally stepped outside. What he saw there was a small cabin in the woods. There was a small porch with stairs leading up to it. It looked old and unkempt from where he was standing. Was this supposed to be his new home? Could there be some kind of mistake? Why would father prepare a rundown cabin like this for me? The servant handed Roland the letter he received and started unpacking. The youth quickly removed the noble seal that indicated that this was the real deal. This lodging has been prepared for you by the Arden House. Don't expect to get any more monetary aid in the future. If you find living here to be too challenging, you are free to return and enlist in the kingdom's army. Does he want me to do that noblesse oblige crap so the other sons won't have to? Noblesse oblige was more or less an excuse for the nobles to act as if they had a stick up their rear end. It was used to imply that with wealth, power, and prestige come responsibilities. Mostly ones that concerned military conscription. The problem with that was, that when the time came for this, most nobles made a run for it. Most of the time when it came to this, the nobles sent away their sons that weren't an heir to the house name. Roland was just the person that fit that bill, born of a commoner, and with no backing at all. Roland crumbled the paper up, his eyes bulging and his face going red. I will be leaving then, Sir Roland, or do you wish to return? I was instructed to take you back if you wish for it. Roland snapped out of it and glared at the coachman. No, this is fine, just leave. I will be fine. Yes sir, there is a well to the east if you walk for 10 minutes towards the city. There is also a spring to the west if you go deeper inside of the forest, but you must be wary of the animals. He was left alone, the sun was going under and he was feeling cold. He started carrying all of his belongings into the wooden cabin. Inside was little space and even less helpful items. There was a shabby bed with a mattress that was just cloth filled with straw and hay. There was something akin to a stove in the corner, some chairs, a wooden desk, and some animal pelts. He sat down on one of those chairs, the crumpled up note in his hands getting surrounded by his mana, which caused it to catch on fire. Mana was still a type of energy, so it was able to produce fire in some form if it came in contact with flammable items. So, this was it. He wants me to give up so that he has an excuse to shove me into his little army. I bet that's why he agreed to it so easily in the first place. He doesn't expect a 10-year-old brat to manage on his own. He wants me to come back crying, "Het." He took out the pouch with his money and counted it. He needed to see how much it would last him, he needed food and water, the rest were all secondary. Think I'll have to pay that Adventurers Guild a visit. Chapter 8. Roland opened up his eyes, his body was stiff and sore. This new bed was even worse than the one at the noble estate, and it was terribly windy in this cabin. He needed to procure some wood for the fireplace and also clean everything in here. It was dusty and even moldy in a couple of places. It didn't look like a place a 10-year-old should be living in. I need to eat something. He had some food packed, but it wouldn't last him long. He needed to depend on the meager amount of coins he had received. From what he counted, they would last him about a month. At least the lodging is free here, maybe I'll move to an inn when I earn something. I need to get to that Adventurers Guild, but will they even let a 10-year-old work for them? Roland knew that adventurers existed in this world. They were mostly considered sellswords. They were more or less hired thugs that hunted monsters for parts and defended merchant convoys from bandits most of the time. They were the odd jobbers of this world. If you gave them enough coin they would do it. At least I managed to get this thing. He pulled out a crystal. It was similar to the one used for the ascension ceremony and worked in a similar way. Roland knew that they cost a lot, so he nabbed one from the Baron's estate while no one was looking. With this, I will be able to respect to a blacksmith or mana scribe, not sure what is better. He nodded and hid the items. He was living in the middle of nowhere and there was a possibility of his house getting sacked while he was away. He couldn't be sure. From a logical standpoint, someone wouldn't put their son in a place that could get robbed. But it's the Baron we are talking about. He might even hire some goons to rough me up to prove a point. He decided to bury the class-up stone away from the log cabin, making sure that it didn't stand out. He had quite the memory, so he didn't need to mark the tree he buried it by, which could only alert someone to the buried treasure. How much money do I have? Not sure about the market value of food here. They never let us shop for ourselves. He returned to his cabin and emptied the coin pouch that he had. All of the coins were stacked on one pile. He didn't even need to count them thanks to his arithmetic skill. He just needed to look at the pile on the table and a number hovered about it, giving him the exact amount of coin he had. This comes down to exactly 1 small gold coin, or 10 large silver coins. What I have here are. In this world, there were 3 types of coins with 2 variations. Each coin had a small and large version. The cheapest one was the small copper coin. 10 of those made up 1 large copper coin and 10 of those were worth as much as a small silver coin. You went all the way up to golden coins. Above a large golden coin stood a royal golden coin that was larger and rectangular in shape. Some copper coins and silver ones. Wonder how much this will last. Should I cook for myself and save on money, or? He glanced to the side and looked at the shabby stove and some rusty pots and pans in the corner. The idea about cooking for himself went out of the window. At most he would buy things like apples or sausages that he could eat without cooking. He looked at himself. He managed to take a small mirror from the noble house. He was wearing standard black leather armor. It consisted of a chest piece, pauldrons, a sword belt, arm guards, a belt with a pouch, and leather boots with some knee protectors. To the side, he had his short sword. He also nabbed a hunting knife from one of the workers while packing. This would save him money on skinning utensils. The knife could also be used as a last-ditch effort of defending himself. Time to head out. He left the shabby log cabin. The thing had a small lock, but if someone decided to kick the door down it would snap in half. Roland had to move somewhere else. He was in the middle of the forest with no protection. In his mind, this was something that his father set up. He was probably getting watched by someone. I bet he told people in town to keep an eye out for me. Well, at least he cares, though I bet it has more to do with the House Arden reputation. Can't have some kid be loose shouting his noble name everywhere. He was convinced that his so-called dad didn't really care for him. He probably left some guards so that he wouldn't croak on the first day, but from what he saw in the letter the man probably wanted him to join the army. Roland on the other hand was set on never returning home. He had enough of living under the rules of other people. It was time for some freedom. Even back in his old life, he felt like he was too dependent on others. It was time for a change. Well, I just need to make enough money, then everything will work out. It was time to go back to the town he had arrived. He remembered the path that the coachman took and backtracked. He was slower on foot, but with some jogging, he could make it in half an hour if he wanted to. The first obstacle proved to be the guards at the entrance. They demanded a fee of 5 large copper coins right of the bat. "Kid, you new here?" one of the guards asked while giving him 5 large copper coins back in exchange for the small silver coin. "Yes, is the Adventurers Guild recruiting?" The guard raised his eyebrow and looked at the child in front of him. Roland was a bit taller than other kids, so he could pass for being older. Still, he didn't look older than 12 or 13 at the most. "You? An adventurer? You sure you don't want to work as a stable boy instead?" The guard smirked, his buddy laughing on the side while Roland left slightly annoyed. "Damn assholes, will I have to pay an entrance fee each time I come here? I'll be out of cash in no time." After passing through the checkpoint he kept walking while looking at the surroundings. The main road was made out of large stone blocks and stretched through the city and right towards a large castle-like structure in the distance. The castle was probably where the city lord stayed in, or either the noble house that was responsible for this plot of land. He continued on while paying attention to the structures more than to the people. The whole place looked like a medieval fantasy city. The buildings were mostly made from stone and the roofs were slightly tipped at an angle and made from what looked to be thin red bricks tiles. After some more walking, he found himself standing in front of a large building with saloon-like doors. It had a sign with 2 axes on the sides and 1 long sword in the middle. Above the symbol, the word Skirwin Adventurers Guild was written. "It will be fine, right?" He gulped as all of his future plans depended on this. If he didn't manage to get a job here he would be forced to work somewhere else. That stable boy job might not seem that outlandish at the time. He started getting nervous and just stood there in front of the door not doing anything. While he was hesitating, some people walked out. It was a group of adventurers, 4 of them. Roland snapped out of it and moved to the side. The people gave him a side glance before departing. Wait, was that an elf? And that was a dwarf, right? Roland kept his eyes on the backs of the people that just walked out. In his noble house, there were only humans and he never saw any other humanoid races anywhere besides the goblins that he trained on. One of the adventurers was an elven woman with long golden hair and wearing green clothes. She had an arrow quiver on her back and a longbow to go with it, indicating that she was an archer class. Next to her was a short man, below 150 centimeters in height. He made up his height disparity with his width. Roland could clearly see he was quite muscular and was carrying a long axe weapon. There were 2 other people with her, a man carrying a sword and some lady in a robe. So, that's a full-blown adventurer party? That lady in the robe might be a mage, or a priest class. He pumped himself up and finally pushed the doors open. They squeaked as he entered. The people inside gave him a fast glance but then went back to their business. The guild was quite large and there were even stairs leading up to a higher level. He walked in slowly, as other people were already going in and out. Inside there were your usual things that made up such a building. A long counter at which some guild workers were standing, all of them were women for some reason. There was your standard large bulletin board with all of the job listings. Finding a suiting job from that chaotic-looking thing looked like a hassle. There were some tables and chairs on the side, some of the guild members were chatting with each other. They were even getting served by some bar wenches. Apparently, you could relax and eat something here while waiting for your loot to be apprised. The place looked busy, but he was lucky as one of the guild workers was free and he could go ask his questions. He walked up to the receptionist. The lady behind it was all smiles and was wearing a pair of glasses. "How can I help you today? Oh, aren't you a little young?" The woman fixed her glasses while looking at the youth. She saw a boy in full gear that was about 150 centimeters. What he was wearing looked like second-hand goods that saw some usage. He had short dark hair and green eyes, his head was oval-shaped, his eyebrows not too thin or bushy. He wasn't all too cute or ugly, more or less average looking for his age. "Yes, I would like to register with the guild, my name is Roland." The boy spoke out while looking at the slightly taller woman. The guild worker looked over the youth some more, which made Roland somewhat nervous. "She won't ask me to get my parents, now will she?" "You want to register? Only people that went through the Ascension ritual can register. Do you have a Tier 1 class?" Roland nodded. "Yes, I have a class and went through my Ascension ritual." The woman pulled out an orb, that looked similar to the one they used back home for measuring things. "Please place your hand on this measuring crystal." Roland nodded. This was probably a required test that needed to be done. He had read that adventurer guilds would do a background check with such devices, but the information was confidential and wouldn't leak out. The woman glanced over the text that appeared on the orb. It had all of Roland's main stats along with his full name and class. Name: Roland Arden, Mage level 5. HP 198/198. MP 764/764. SP 253/253. Strength: 15. Agility: 16. Dexterity: 25. Vitality: 15. Endurance: 16. Intelligence: 50. Willpower: 28. Charisma: 10. Luck: 6. She could see all of his stats. Her eyes remained glued to the intelligence stat for a moment before she moved on and finally spoke out. "You will have to make a payment of 2 large silver coins for your adventurer card. If you agree, please fill out this form and wait till it's made." He took the piece of paper. He had to fill out his name and agree to some terms. Terms like that the guild was not responsible for his death and where his belongings should be sent if he died on the job. It didn't take long for the woman to walk away with the orb and paper in hand. He sat down in the corner of the guild and waited. The lady informed him that his card would be made within the hour. He took his time to observe the people in the building. They were of various races and genders. He saw more elves, lizard-like people, more dwarfs, and huge individuals that looked like muscular basketball players. Think that person is from the Goliath race. The books said that they are known for their strength. They are a race of warriors, but they lack some intelligence and like to solve their problems with fighting. The lizard-like people are probably dragonkin. Supposedly they have dragon blood running through their veins. It's said that they get confused with the lesser lizardman monsters from time to time. Surprising that I didn't get thrown out from here. They didn't even think to ask me about my age. Roland was still someone with his old values. He didn't understand how people could let a 10-year-old just work as an adventurer. People in this world were different. If you had the ability to work, you could work. No one looked at the person's age. After going through the Ascension ritual, you were deemed worthy. He was handed his adventurer's card, but before that, he had to poke his thumb and let a drop of blood land on it. The moment it landed, it shone for a fraction of a second. His rank and photo along with the name Roland appeared. The adventurer cards only showed your first name, but you could add a family name or a title there if you wanted. Roland decided on keeping his noble title a secret. For now, only the guild would have his full credentials. He wasn't the first person in this world that wanted to leave his past behind, and last names were associated with noble houses. The registration process is finished. Congratulations on becoming a bronze rank adventurer. As a bronze rank, you are allowed to take on jobs at the bronze and steel rank. It is advised to take jobs at your own rank. You will find the job listings on the notice board. If you fail to complete a job you take, you will have to pay a fine. This is how his registration ended, going quite smoothly and without a hiccup. He decided to take a look at the available jobs, taking the advice to heart about not taking jobs above his grade. What type of jobs can a bronze rank adventurer take? He started glancing at the papers. Luckily they were all organized by their rank. Requesting a worker for latrine cleaning, 10 large coppers a day. Mr. Fuzzles has gone missing, he is a brown cat. Requesting help in moving furniture and other heavy objects. Searching for someone to cut grass. He narrowed his eyes as he continued going through all the bronze grade listings. They were all odd jobs that didn't require any fighting power. Maybe that's why they accepted me as an adventurer so easily. They expect me to do these shitty jobs and not actually do anything dangerous. Roland didn't want to spend his day cleaning toilets or cutting grass. He needed to get his level up fast and earn more money. After going through most of the bronze grade listings he moved to the steel grade ones. Goblins have been appearing close to the farms and are killing the livestock. 5 large copper per goblin, left ear needed as proof. He read and found a subjugation request right off the bat. More goblins, hey. Probably should stick to monsters I'm familiar with. There were other listings concerning monsters besides that. There was a nearby dungeon but he couldn't enter it alone as a bronze rank adventurer. He would either need to find a party or get himself up to steel rank. He went through some other possible creatures he could hunt outside the dungeon and decided to stick to that for the time being. Think I'll go eat something first and then head out. There were also notices for bringing in monster deers and boars for meat, guess you can eat those. He left the Adventurers Guild, identification card in hand. He wanted to do a small tour of the town, maybe find better lodging than that shady shack in the woods. Then it would be time for work. His adventure was only starting. Chapter 9. Roland walked and walked. The place he was in wasn't that large. If he compared it to the cities from his old world, this was more of a small town. A large wall was surrounding the area and the buildings were closely packed together. These types of standard fortifications were there in place to protect the city people from monster attacks. Even in large kingdoms like this, there were certain places that were off limits. Places with nasty monsters or poisonous terrain that made the area unlivable. After a long time of walking and getting his adventurer card, he decided to take a break at an inn. Inside there were a lot of people chatting and a bard-like person was playing on some kind of lute instrument. Just like the Adventurers Guild, this establishment's interior was quite large. There were many tables that already had a bunch of individuals sitting in them. He felt a bit out of place as he didn't know a single person in this city. There is some room in the corner there. Do I need to wait for a waitress? Do they call them bar wenches here? He wasn't really sure. Noble houses didn't really have any books about how the commoners lived. For now, he decided to wait and see. He could probably learn from the patrons in here on how he should present himself. He sat himself down in at the free table and looked at the people. Again he was greeted by a colorful array of individuals. The elves were just as he read in books and saw in fiction. They were tall and slender with pointy ears. Their hair color was either blonde or white. He didn't spot any dark elves though. While waiting, a waitress finally appeared and gave Roland a curious look. What will it be, little guy? He looked up. The woman was quite large and on the wider side. She was wearing one of those wench dresses that made him think of a German festival. Ah! I'll just have some water and something to eat. What do you have? For a charming little fella like you? How about some of the tasty porridge, or some grilled meat so that you grow big and strong? Roland thought about it for a moment and ordered both. He wanted to test the food here out. If it was abysmal he would try a different place. The woman smiled and walked away. He saw her move towards the bartender. The woman was quite loud, so he overheard the two talking. "One order of meat and some porridge for our young customer there." The man standing at the bar was quite large and muscular. He was even missing an eye and had a large scar in its place. "What, you got someone to order that shitty gruel? Did you blackmail him or something?" The woman frowned and tried smacking the man with the empty tray she was holding. "Shut your trap, you idiot, before I make you sleep outside again." The man grumbled and went back into the kitchen. Roland, on the other hand, was deliberating on walking out. He didn't like the sound of that. Could this porridge be spoiled? Well, this was quite bland. He looked at the empty plates. The porridge was made from some unidentified grains, the meat was just dried jerky. Nothing was seasoned, nor did it taste like anything. The food here was literally hard to swallow. "Ugh, I'm already missing Martha's cooking. Is this what the common people eat?" The whole thing cost him 7 large copper coins. "So I need to kill 2 goblins to even have enough for a single meal. Guess life doesn't count for much here. I should have asked that guild attendant about how much I can get for a goblin mana stone. I'll ask her after I get this job done." He left the coins on the table. The large lady instantly swooped in to grab those coins of the table. Like a hawk diving for a nice plump mouse on the field. He asked about the lodging fees and was said that it was 2 small silvers for a night, and 5 large copper coins extra if he wanted breakfast to go with that. He could also pay a monthly fee that would save him about 10%. "I have enough money to last me slightly above a month of lodging." He needed to go hunt some goblins first. Killing 5 of those a day would be the minimum amount of work. Though, he would probably be starting with only 1 meal a day with that. And that's not taking any other expenses into consideration. This sword will also need repairing after a while. He frowned. This wasn't turning out to be such a dream job after all. He needed to start somewhere though. He was already used to slaying goblins and was already a level 5 mage. He only needed 20 more levels and he already had the stone for the class change. "The only thing I still need is a map of this area." He had the world map at his old home, but there were no city maps besides the capital and the city his family lived in. He headed over to a library and had to spend another small silver coin to get himself one. He made a mental note to check this place out later. Maybe there would be some new books to read. The more he read, the more his identification skill leveled up. Knowledge was power and this skills level was an indicator of it. It's strange how that skill works. Why would general knowledge help me identify things I have never seen before? He left through the main gate again. This time he flashed the guards his new adventurer's card and was let out without a problem. "Okay, these are the farms that have been getting attacked. The goblins are probably somewhere in that forest." Goblins were creatures that lived in groups. They had a strength-based hierarchy structure similar to some human tribes. The strongest member was the tribe chief. The leader was mostly an evolved monster, either a goblin soldier or a goblin shaman that was more intelligent than his tribe counterparts. "I sure hope it's not a hobgoblin though, I don't think I'd stand a chance." He wasn't planning on going too close to the monster base or doing a silly thing of clearing it out himself. No, he would just hunt some lone goblins in hopes of getting a free mana stone together with his kill. "I should be careful, these goblins will probably be of a higher level than the ones they let me kill back at the Arden estate. Though they are still only goblins, even on higher levels they are quite weak." He checked his items again and then took out his short sword. He didn't bother to talk with the farmers and just went inside. The forest was densely packed with trees, but thanks to his smaller stature it wasn't too difficult to move around. This is when someone with a tracking class like a hunter would be helpful. He wandered through the forest while on his toes. He moved slowly while hiding behind the bushes and trees in hopes of getting the drop on the monsters. This proved to be the right choice as he spotted 2 goblins just lazing around by another large tree. "There we go, if I only didn't need to chant this shit, level 3 and a level 4. Should be fine." He could whisper the chants while casting, but that lowered the spell's destructive power by a notch. It would be enough for these goblins though. His magic attack was quite high thanks to his high intelligence stat. Source of all magic, heed my call. While performing the incantation, Roland thought back to the time of his spell training. He did a couple of tests, mostly trying to somehow circumvent those chants and incantations. He tried gathering the mana around him and through this body with the help of his skills. It worked great all up to the moment of shaping the mana ball that would be the bolt. Right at the end it always evaporated into nothingness. It just didn't work unless he chanted while manipulating the magical energies. It was as if the spells required two passwords, one being the chant and the other shaping the mana required for the spell. Mana bolt. The mana bolt whizzed through the air and landed straight on the goblin's face. Roland wasn't sure why, but his aim was quite good. Maybe his dexterity had something to do with it. The other theory was the number of FPS games that he played in his previous life. The goblin's head flew backward as if hit by a bowling ball. The small creature fell back and against the tree, blood gushing from its wound as it slowly faded away into oblivion. You have gained 20 experience points. Gidgee. The other goblin looked at his companion with surprise in its eyes, but soon it realized what transpired. Roland charged out from his hiding place, short sword in hand, and ready to deliver a killing blow. The other monster was slow to react, but it looked towards the charging 10-year-old and gave out a high-pitched scream. It moved the club it was holding up into the air, bringing it down on its enemy while jumping right at him. You goblins are easy to read. Roland skillfully evaded the attack and just jabbed the pointy end of his short sword into the goblin's chest. The moment the attack landed, the monster gave out a wail and started thrashing about with its club in hand. The youth backed off, letting the monster tire itself out before delivering the finishing blow. You have gained 18 experience points. That's not that hard. Roland looked down at the two defeated monsters. He was panting as the adrenaline pumped through his body. Through training and time, he had started getting accustomed to fighting monsters. From his perspective, a clear grasp of the situation during a fight outweighed pure stats. He pulled out his hunting knife and went for the ears, making sure to get the right one that the Adventurers Guild was asking for. He didn't feel any mana coming from these two dead bodies, which meant that they had no mana stones. This was one of the more useful uses of his mana sense skill. He could easily sense if a creature had or didn't have a mana stone in its body. Thanks to this he saved a lot of time. Wonder if how other people do it. Do they just butcher each monster to see if it's there? Maybe they have some detection items. He squatted down and looked at the monster bodies. Their weapons were just wooden clubs and they had no armor whatsoever. He wouldn't be able to sell anything off them. I don't think anyone would buy stained loincloths. I should probably. His body jerked to the side suddenly, just in time to dodge an incoming wooden spear that came flying in his direction. He brought out his sword to defend himself and saw two other goblins charging at him. Did the screams from these two alert the others? He had miscalculated and remained here for too long. He was used to killing monsters at a safe location, but these creatures were tribal. When one of them fell, the others would come to help. The high-pitched battle cries that these little monsters gave out were to signal their allies. Shit! He didn't think that he'd lose to these two, but there could be more coming. He couldn't stay in this location for long, and his magic bolt spell that he used as a surprise tactic was a one-time thing before the battle. He couldn't use it while running either. If he panted during chanting, the spell would collapse. He ducked for the bushes on the side while the two angry green men chased after him. He wasn't sure how their tracking skills were, but they shouldn't be all that great. He was also faster than the two buggers. If he gained enough space, he might have been able to recast his spell. This class isn't good for solo leveling. He found himself running away just to stop and chant his incantation. When one of the goblins arrived before him, he would send a mana bolt spell right at their face. He wasn't concerned about being quiet anymore either, so his spells were packing a lot more this time around. This had the adverse effect of alerting more goblins to his location. Mana bolt. You have gained 19 experience points. Another goblin fell. The mana bolt came from somewhere up in the trees. The other green midget didn't know where the enemy was. He looked and looked only to hear a human's voice echo through the tightly packed forest. "Mana bolt, you little shit! You have gained 15 experience points. Congratulations, you have leveled up." The goblin chest exploded as a large ball of mana energy pierced through it. Roland was sitting on top of a tree and just chucking his spells at the dumb goblins. After ruing away for an hour, he decided to climb up a tree. Luckily these monsters weren't too bright. "Think that was the last one of them. Glad I have this climbing and sneaking skill unlocked." He used a new tactic of just hiding up in the trees and waiting for the goblins to arrive. He delivered sure hit kills from distance and disappeared the moment another monster appeared. Thanks to his sneaking skill, the enemy monster had a hard time finding him before they could react. They were hit by dense mana bolts. After waiting it out for 10 minutes, he finally decided to slide down the large tree he was hiding in. He hopped down and sneaked over to the blast zone. 5 dead goblin bodies were there. He had leveled up from killing all these goblins, and there were even some scattered bodies that he left behind while running away. "I don't think it would be smart to go back for those." He grabbed the 5 ears from this group and even managed to nab a mana stone from one of them. He was tired and had wandered a bit too far into the forest area. This was the time for a tactical retreat. "This is enough for today. I should go report and get my money, then take a bath." Roland's first day as an adventurer ended. He managed to return to the Adventurers Guild without a problem, and the guards didn't bother him either. The same lady that gave him the card was surprised to see him at the end of the day, and with 7 goblin ears to boot. With this, he had earned 35 large copper coins from the monster subjugation quest. The tiny mana stone he acquired went for 4 small silver coins each. He had 2 more back from his training days. With this, he was 155 large copper coins richer. "I can do this. The stronger I get, the more money I will earn. I'm not going back to that log cabin, or that stinky noble house." Roland clenched his fist tightly while looking at his coin pouch. He finally saw some light at the end of the tunnel. If he worked hard, he would be able to level up his class, gain money, and later achieve his goal of independence. Chapter 10. A bunch of small, green, humanoid-looking creatures were shouting at each other. One of them was holding a large piece of meat that used to be a leg of some kind of boar. They gritted their teeth at each other until a larger goblin that had a darker tint of green appeared. The smaller ones cowered as the meaner-looking goblin swiped away the large piece of meat for himself. It shouted something out and opened its large mouth. The teeth looked yellow and quite sharp. Before the monster could have its feast, something odd happened. A strange sound of something whizzing was heard by some of the goblins, but at that point, it was too late. A glowing blue arrow shot out of the trees and embedded itself into the larger goblin's neck. It had enough penetrating power to pierce right through. The tip was even poking out on the other side. The arrow made from blue energy fizzled out into nothingness soon after. The monster gurgled while not knowing what had happened. It could only flail its arms around before suffering from hemorrhage. Soon enough it passed out and died. The larger goblin's comrades started shouting and panicking, not knowing why their leader had died just like that. About 100 meters away up in a large tree was Roland. He was already chanting another spell while pointing with his finger at the next victim. Mana arrow. Another blue arrow shot through the air towards the small goblin encampment. Roland had scouted it out after spending quite a bit of time hunting the goblins in this forest. The second mana arrow landed on the next enemy, and he heard the female voice announcing that he had gained experience. "I managed to get the leader on the first try, the rest are just small fries. Time to finish this up." He took his time finishing up the goblins from a safe spot. He descended only when the enemy numbers dwindled enough for him to engage them in melee range. The normal goblins didn't pose much of a threat to him at this point, and he knew their attacking patterns by heart. Now he just needed to pick up the loot and head back. The only problem was that he had to go to the Adventurers Guild again. The Adventurers Guild was bustling with people. There were various people of various races coming in and out of the building. Dwarfs, elves, you name it, there were even people with animal ears. Quite a bit of those people were focused on a small robed youth. This youth had garnered some fame for the past 3 months he had arrived in this town. Hey, it's the little goblin slayer. Did he wipe out a nest? I think he even managed to get a shaman last time. The people from the side gossiped while looking at Roland. He was one of the rising rookies here, mostly due to having a knack for killing goblins. Most of the adventurers didn't bother with those, they were busy with dungeon exploration that had more to offer than pesky goblins. Roland grumbled while trying to cover his face with the new robe that he bought. He didn't like the attention and didn't like to stick out. I've earned a strange title, it's even in my status now. Goblin Hunter title. A person with this title is feared by goblins. Goblins might suffer a fear debuff while fighting with a person with this title, works only on goblins below the title holder's level. Might suffer, so it's just a random effect. Titles like this could be earned by hunting monsters. There were various levels of titles and some even gave bonuses to attack or defense. Roland took his money and left the Adventurers Guild while the other guild members laughed and cheered. For some reason, he had become some kind of mascot to these adventures. They would shout out "Little Goblin Slayer" the moment they saw him, which started to annoy him. Whenever he shouted back they would just laugh at him and egg him on even more. Treating me like a kid. He entered the inn he was staying at, this was the same one that he ate his first meal at. After going through the whole city, this one was the one most in his price range. He had rented one of the rooms upstairs for himself and was staying here for the time being. He was already high up with his levels thanks to the constant monster hunting. Roland glanced at his stats while eating some beef jerky. Name, Roland Arden, Mage level 20. HP 289/289. MP 1304/1304. SP 368/368. Strength, 21. Agility, 25. Dexterity, 36. Vitality, 22. Endurance, 23. Intelligence, 72. Willpower, 50. Charisma, 11. Luck, 6. He also looked at the spells that he knew how to cast, he had made some progress there too. Mana Bolt level 7 spell, a focused bolt of mana energy that deals mana damage to one target. The damage done depends on the user's intelligence. Mana Arrow level 5 spell, an arrow made purely from mana, has increased speed and penetrative power compared to the Mana Bolt spell. Mana Shield level 3 spell, a mana shield that shields the caster or their allies from harm. Ember level 6 spell, by causing friction with mana the caster can create a small fire. Mana Hands level 5 spell, the caster can create hands made from mana. The weight and distance this spell can be used for is dependent on the intelligence stat. He had gained access to these spells mostly by leveling up. It was a strange thing, after he attained a certain level the game-like system would give him a prompt that he had learned a spell. The knowledge of how to cast it would somehow be inserted into his brain. He would instantly know the incantation and how to construct the spell with his mana. This wasn't the only way you got spells. You could learn some yourself, some people could even create them. The classes offered a limited array of spells that they could use. If he wanted more he would have to experiment himself or buy some magic books that would explain the spell process to him. His mage class came equipped with 3 basic spells: Mana Bolt, Mana Arrow, and Mana Shield. He had learned the Ember and Mana Hands spell thanks to a book he had previously obtained at the Arden Estate. Spellbooks were extremely costly, so he was only able to get some rudimentary knowledge. The whole process of spell casting was hard to explain. The mage had to guide the mana outwards in a certain sequence while focusing on the spell formula. This spell formula was also called a spell circle. The mage had to perfectly imagine the spell circle while at the same time shaping the mana and chanting in sequence. This was quite the hard process that didn't allow for any of the steps to fail, otherwise, the spell would sizzle out. Luckily the tier 1 spells were quite easy to master, the spell circles were just basic symbols and didn't take much brain power to produce. This is why it was important to have a high intelligence stat that helped the caster with visualizing and recalling the spell circles. The Tier 2 classes and above were apparently even harder to work with. Higher tier spells required larger circles and even longer incantations, but this was where skills came into play as they lowered the strain on the caster's mind if he trained them. I gain experience by leveling up my spells too. The more I use them, the stronger they become, and the faster I can do the chants. In this world, you garnered experience not only from killing monsters. You also gained it by leveling up your skills and abilities. When he managed to push his Mana Bolt spell to the next level, he received a pop-up window with the experience. It was a lot more than what he was getting from killing monsters. You could even level up by creating items if you were a crafting class. I'm almost through with my first class. Which of the two should I pick first, the blacksmith or the scribe one? The closer he got to level 25, the more he deliberated. He was leaning towards picking the scribe first as it was closer to the mage class. He would be ditching his magic skill tree soon, so he wanted to be done with it. If he switched to something like a blacksmith that had nothing to do with magic, he felt like it would be harder to get past this scroll-making class. Yeah, think that would be the better one to start out with. Probably easier too. Roland nodded while thinking back to a certain scene. That man was sitting there again. He had been here for 3 months already. By slaying the goblins and getting some mana stones from their bodies, he was able to get by on his own. This was probably something the Baron didn't take into account. At some point, he noticed that there was a certain man constantly watching him whenever he was in town. He is probably a guard sent by Daddy Dearest. I'm not sure if I should be happy that he cares, or afraid that they might drag me back home, and I'd just gotten used to this place. I might have to change locations. This was another thing on his agenda, leaving this city and setting out on his own. He was feeling good with himself. Fighting so many goblins every day had given him a slight confidence boost in his abilities. He feared that he would be dragged back. He was still a noble child and the adults could easily overpower him if they wanted to. Well, not like that guy is even doing his job right, even I managed to spot him with no problem. The man tailing him was quite bad at it. He only kept an eye on him during the day and while he was in the city. He never followed him into the goblin-infested forest. Roland theorized that the people at the Arden estate didn't want to spend too much coin on his tail, so they ended up with an incompetent one. He was even passed out drunk that one day when I came back. Wish my job was so easy. Roland had already chosen his next destination. This town he was in wasn't really suited for his needs. He was aiming to be a mostly crafting-oriented class. This city didn't really have that. It was a place for adventurers and had a dungeon, but there weren't really many places where you could learn a smithing profession. Most of the goods were shipped over from other cities that were closer to mines. The people working at those professions didn't like living next to an active dungeon. The monster-infested areas like the forest Roland used for grinding didn't help either. Yeah, the best city for me now would be Edelgard. It has the facilities that I need, and if I have a crafting class I can get an apprenticeship. Roland was already bumbling around with his mage class. He felt like he would know many more spells if he was at some sort of academy and had a teacher. He didn't want to get hired by some second-rate blacksmith and spend years on leveling up. You could actually just level up by creating items, but he wasn't sure of the logistics of that quite yet. I can learn both of those at that city. It's renowned for its crafting classes, just need to get those 5 levels up. On the next day, Roland headed out once more. Even though he had killed many goblins, the pay wasn't all that great. His leather armor was getting worn down and he had to have his sword repaired. While grumbling to himself, he moved towards the notice board, his eyes going to the iron class job offers. I don't see any goblin notices. Did I get them all? Maybe they run away deeper into the forest. He was known as the Goblin Slayer for a reason. He had cleared out quite an amount of nests in these past 3 months. He mostly used guerrilla tactics of luring a small group out for slaughter. He used the tall trees and thick bushes to his advantage and even managed to level up some of his basic skills to normal ones. While Roland was contemplating his next move, a person moved over to him. The voice seemed to belong to a girl. "Excuse me, aren't you who they call the little goblin slayer?" Roland frowned instantly. He wasn't sure why, but that nickname ticked him off. The person who asked him was a red-haired girl. From the looks of her gear she was an archer. Roland looked at her from top to bottom, coming to the conclusion that she was probably a young adventurer in her mid-teens. "I guess that's what people call me around here. My name is Roland though," he responded while grumbling slightly. The girl smiled and then continued with the conversation. "Great. It's rumored that you are a mage in training, is that true?" Roland raised his eyebrow and kind of figured out where this was going. The girl didn't look dangerous or nefarious, so he just nodded. He could also ask the guild staff about any other adventurers if it was required. "Yes. Here is the deal, our party is missing one person right now, we could use someone for the back line." The girl pointed to two other people that were standing in the back. With the archer, they would make a group of 3, which was slightly small for a full party. From what Roland could see beside the red-haired girl he was talking with, there was a warrior with a shield and what looked to be someone who used daggers, either a thief or scout. The only peculiar thing about this was, that all of them were female. "Oh? Are you heading into the dungeon?" The girl nodded. This wasn't anything out of the ordinary. People constantly formed new parties or exchanged members with others. "Yes, we will of course do an even split, 4 ways." He wanted to rub his chin to think. He was running low on monsters to kill and he wasn't allowed to go into the dungeon by himself with how low his rank was. This group consisted of young girls that weren't probably much stronger than him, but he could very much use the help. He didn't really have a reason to refuse. He could also ask the guild staff about these 3 and if they weren't shady later on, then decline if they were fishy. "Are you sure? I'm still just on my first class." The red-haired girl smiled and tapped him on the shoulder. "No need to worry, we just need some backline support and you are quite famous around here. No need to be afraid, these big sister will protect you if something happens." He twitched a bit. He almost forgot that he was a 10-year-old here and looked like a little brat with some baby fat on his face. For the time being, he nodded and he and the red-haired girl moved over to the other 2. The warrior woman was clearly from the Goliath race. She was 2 meters tall and was quite muscular. Her skin was brown in tone and her nose looked like it was squished back by a brick. The other girl was slightly taller than he was, at about 160 centimeters. The moment he walked up he noticed the large animal ears coming out from the top of her head along with a bushy white tail in the back. Her hair was grey and her eyes reminded him of a wolf. She was wearing leather armor and had 2 long daggers strapped to her side, indicating that she was probably primed more for agility. The last girl was the redhead. She was taller than the previous girl at about 170 centimeters. She was wearing a really tight uniform. Around her chest was some kind of belt, probably to connect a quiver to. "He is so tiny, you sure he can handle this, Rebecca?" The large warrior girl looked at Roland while leaning down, her mouth showing off those pearly whites as she grinned. "Hey, don't scare him, Sahildr, I had enough trouble convincing him to come here." The third wolf girl didn't say much, she just gave him a glance and then sat down at the nearby table behind them. "Ah, let me introduce you. The large dumb one here is Sahildr, the quiet one back there is Raina and my name is Rebecca, you can just call me Becky." The 3 were peculiar looking but they had some charm to them. They all sat down by the table and started chatting. "So, our 4th party member had left our party, and I think you would be the perfect fit," Becky proclaimed while looking at Roland with sparkling eyes. "Ha, you mean she left us hanging and run away with some guy, that damn harlot?" replied Sahildr while smirking to the side. For some reason she looked like she wanted to give Roland a tug on his cheeks. The third lady remained silent while munching on a chicken leg. "Is that so? Well, I don't have a reason to refuse." Saw you looking at the notice board, run out of the gobos, hey? Little goblin slayer. Please don't call me that. Roland groaned while the girls smirked at each other. Before we proceed, I need to ask, is there any reason why your party only has women? Roland asked while Sahildra was the one to reply. That's easy, we just don't trust men, they always try to start something during the night camps. Hey, does this brat even know what I'm talking about? The woman made a circle with her hand and index finger and then started sticking another finger through it, in and out it went. She only stopped after Becky gave her a glare. Roland deadpanned at the explanation. He looked at the three but wasn't all that attracted to them. It was probably due to his mental age being at 30, these girls looked to be 16 and weren't really in his striking range. He was also stuck in the body of a 10-year-old, so that was also a factor. But I'm also a man. Roland replied while the girls looked at him, they promptly burst out in laughter. What are you, like 11 or 12? Don't think you will be making any night visits anytime soon. Becky moved her hand over her mouth while trying not to laugh. So they don't want to form parties with men as they try to climb into their beds at night. I'm 10 so they feel confident that I won't try to start anything, seems logical. 12, sure, let's go with that. HOH, so mysterious, you're not 11 are you? No, I'm 12. Are you sure, do you even have hair down there? This is sexual harassment, please stop. The group of girls started laughing while they continued to chat. Roland also discovered that all of them were on their second, Tier 1 class already. Most Tier 2 classes had that requirement, so this wasn't something odd. He remembered that most people didn't have the luxury of having their ascension right after their 10th birthday. There was also a slight experience gain debuff to the second Tier 1 class, it also depended on the type of class and what it gave you. Combat classes had the biggest debuffs while some lesser crafting classes could be leveled up the fastest, but they mostly gave subpar stats after leveling. They decided that they would leave after everyone prepared, they would meet up at the city gates after an hour. Roland didn't need much, so he just filled up by eating some more at the inn. He also checked at the guild and got the okay, the girls were a reputable party. The next destination would be the dungeon.